They were trying to have the experience of what it is to be alive, what it is to have a name. So I'm going to come back to that over and over and over again, because I have experienced in myself and I have experienced with other people that that's what they're searching for. And I think when there's a tragedy or something like this, it's a microcosm of finding that out. The question then becomes how? And it's that same question that can be applied to all of life all of the time.
When life throws a challenge at you, one thing is certain. To find a resolution for every issue, every problem, for everybody, there's more than one way.
Actually, somebody called me yesterday, and she wanted to talk about somewhat about the podcast that we did, the last one prior to the one we're about to do right now. And as she was talking about that, she said, I just wish I had millions of dollars, because then I could send over a lot of money to Western North Carolina and really help out.
Yeah.
And I thought, golly, yeah. I mean, you're the 25th person that has said on some level, I wish there was
they could help in some way.
Yeah, that this tragedy is so close to home and so close to people's hearts, and people know other people over there plus places where they've been, and so that makes it even more important to them.
Yeah, a lot of connection.
So much connection. And when that happens, it really, really pulls at how can I help, or what can I do to help, and oftentimes it's it can be a bit disheartening to people when they like with her, it's, but I don't have millions of dollars,
right? And
so therefore I cannot help to the capacity that I would like to help.
Sure, yeah.
And so these things like these tragedies bring up kind of a microcosm of life that really asks, where can I use my gifts and my talents best to make a difference in the world?
Yeah.
And that's one thing that it says. And in instances like this, my hope for people is that they can just find that way, whatever that way, be it big or small, where they can help, and then they can just be okay with that,
with what they can do,
what they can actually, because what these situations call us to do is truly take a look at, where are my gifts and talents? What can I actually do? How can I actually help? Because sometimes I might want to help and I rush over there, and there not really be anything for me to do right away. Maybe eventually somebody can find something for me to do.
So timing's a part of it.
Timing and talent and skill.
Yeah.
So like a search and rescue person they're going to know exactly what, right? Yeah. And that gives them a deep sense of purpose and meaning, and which is one of the things that can happen at time like this. But when people are, you're just kind of a regular person. And maybe you don't have those kind of gifts. You can't do that kind of stuff. So where can you help? And my hope for people is, like I said, you can only do what you can do, and be satisfied with what you can do. And that is something.
I think, sometimes as we're dealing with that feeling of wanting to help, we feel an urgency of wanting to do that quickly. We sense the depth of the need, and we want to jump to action. And when the hurricanes happened in the Gulf, I went down with a team to do some work there, and we're driving around, kind of looking at the area where we were going to be working, and we passed a corner where there was a gas station. There wasn't much left of the gas station anymore, but there was a large mountain there that we could see as we were driving up, and as we got closer to it, we could tell that it was a mountain of garbage bags. Wow. And so we were asking about it and just assuming that it was trash from the cleanup. And the person that was with us said, no, those are clothes.
Oh, wow.
He said that's, people donated clothes, wanting to help.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't what was needed in the moment. And then there was no place to put those. So they just put them on that empty lot.
Wow.
And so there was this kind of visual reminder of the idea of sometimes the rush to action leads us to an action that maybe isn't as helpful in the moment.
Yeah. It's not as helpful in the moment, and it doesn't give you the sense of how can I really, once again, use the gifts that I have to really
Right.
and truly. Right. Because I have a friend who did the opposite, who sat back and waited, fretted a bit about what she could or couldn't do,
Mm-hmm.
but waited and then talked with her husband about and then they found the perfect place where they could help.
Yeah.
And it was a part of town that they've hung out in before, and then specifically a coffee shop that
Mm-hmm.
they'd spent time in. Well, that coffee shop needed help.
Okay.
And so they found, okay, well, we could give our money to whatever, but that was the exact place where that had a lot of deep meaning for them and a lot of connection.
Yeah. So they were giving back to people that had given to them. I mean, just, there was
Right.
connection.
And it was the opposite of rush to action.
Right.
It was, let's just take a step back and really look and see where we can help. And that's where it was.
Mm. Rather than drifting into a feeling of helplessness or overwhelm, I think for a lot of people, just with the idea, like you mentioned, the person you said, they want to do so much.
Yeah.
And that gap between what they would want to do and maybe what they're uniquely equipped to do may be large.
Yeah, it could be big.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make you bad.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That just helps you to see, okay, this is who I am and this is what I have to give. So that's where instances like this can become a real spiritual teaching time.
How do you mean?
I mean, you can really find out these microcosms that call us to act, or to call us to take a look at ourselves and see how we best can help.
Mm-hmm.
These microcosms like this give us the opportunity to really take a look at who we are and what we actually have to give to the world. What we can actually do. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
As long as we don't measure it against somebody else, what somebody else can do, or what somebody else's gifts are, or that somebody else is more important than we are.
Mm-hmm.
That there is somebody who can give millions. I've heard of people who gave millions and millions of dollars. Thank God that they can do that.
It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. But I don't have to compare myself to them.
Sure.
And say somehow or another they gave more and I did less, and that makes them more. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like one of the things about, if we want to take it in this direction, one of the things about the spiritual part of things like this, events like this, is, okay, one aspect would be how much and how many people can I help?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to help as much and as many as I possibly can. And that's one way to say, yeah, I did all that I could do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, another way to see it is that within the spiritual realm, people would say, if you help one person, you help the whole world.
Mm. That's a really different way to look at it.
Yeah, it's a very different way to look at it. So you'd say, well, I was able to help this.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so I had a friend who went over to India. And Westerners, oftentimes when they go over to India, are just overwhelmed by the poverty.
Yeah.
Right? Just overwhelmed by people sleeping in the streets and just can't hardly function because there's so much.
Yeah.
And so what he decided to do was pick one person. And that was going to be the person that he helped throughout the whole time he was there. So that one person became his rickshaw person. That one person became the person that he gave food to every day and night. He paid him to be a rickshaw driver. He paid him when he asked him questions about where might I go, what might I do, when he acted as kind of like a pseudo tour guide. And that's how he did it. Because his mindset was, if you help one person, you help the whole world.
Sure.
Because you're not going to take care of all the poverty.
Yeah, so it's too big.
Yeah, it's too big. And it's the same thing within situations like in...
Yeah.
Right? Everybody can do what they can do. And my hope for that is people can see that. And then it can start to teach us once again more about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
What are, once, like I said, what are our true gifts? What do we have to give the world? One of my favorite quotes is from a guy named Frederick Buechner, and he says something along the lines of this: the place God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. The place where God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet.
Man.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and that can be on a micro level, and it can be on a macro level.
Mm-hmm.
So my deep hunger in this instance that we're talking about might be, how can I help?
Yeah.
Okay. What's going to bring me, or that's the my deep gladness would be finding the actual way where I can help in the best way that I can help.
Mm-hmm.
And that, once again, might be with one person, or it might be with a tremendous number of people. Because in the end, I think what these events show us is humanity's desire and need to feel like their life matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
That
hunger for purpose,
yes,
and just significance. I mean, even just, yeah.
And that's built into who we are as human beings. So it's a good thing
to want that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That we all want meaning. We all want significance.
And I think in situations like this, we feel that collective wanting to contribute.
Yeah.
Wanting to be a part of whatever the help, relief, whatever solution is. We have that natural desire in us to say, I want to connect to others in pain or others that have a need.
Yes, and one of the reasons for that wanting to connect is that in that place we find deep, deep, deep meaning.
Yeah.
We find the place of life where there's just this just makes me feel alive.
And I love the way that quote says it, where it's the gladness and the hunger meet.
Yeah.
To think of those two things coming together. I mean, it's a kind of a beautiful collision, really.
It is.
If you think about it.
It is. And it's not, gosh, please, let's have more tragedies.
Right.
So that we can have this feeling. No, it's the tragedies can help us find what it is in us that we have to give to the world, in a sense. Right. What that looks like. And like I said, it can be on a micro level, or it can be on a macro level, or somewhere in between.
Well, and kind of like you said earlier, the idea of kind of getting our head around helping one person is helping every person in some way.
In some way.
That's a big thought. I don't think that's real natural for us sometimes.
How come? Why, I think?
I think we, like you said, we get into comparison of our efforts, or maybe we feel better about a larger action when maybe a larger action isn't always what's needed. Mm-hmm. Maybe it feels better to us sometimes to make a big splash instead of a little drop or a ripple somewhere, not knowing the impact that has down the road.
Yeah. Well, like I'm saying, where'd that come from?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Well, there's a story about that.
Okay.
There's a story about that in Scripture that I think it's a story about this, and it's called the Tower of Babel. Most people have heard of this, which makes it the worst stories in the world, because people already think therefore they know what it means, and you don't need to read the story even again. Because somebody told me in 5th grade Sunday school what that means, and so I already know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Right? So we don't even need to look at it. But you do need to look at it, because it's a myth about what we're talking about. about what it means to be human and where people find meaning and significance and in what way. I think it is anyway.
Tell me how you got there.
Okay, so here's the story. Here's the story. So everybody who lived in the world spoke the same language and was able to communicate, and that was good to a degree. And because they could all communicate and all were hanging out together, somebody came up with this idea. The person came up and said, "Hey, I got an idea. Let's make a name for ourselves. And the way we're going to go about and make a name for ourselves is by building a city with a tower in the middle, and the tower is going to reach all the way up to heaven. And once we do that, we'll have made a name for ourselves."
Yeah. Quite the accomplishment.
Right? Right, yeah, quite the accomplishment. Okay, so let's stop right there. And let me ask you, and we'll just kind of go back and forth with this.
Okay.
What does it mean to make a name for yourself?
It seems like in this story that so far that it's the idea of being recognized potentially.
Okay.
Maybe standing out over others.
Okay. And what does that do for a person to be recognized?
I mean, I think it feels good to be known.
Okay, so it feels good to be known.
Yeah.
All right, so there's something in the human person that needs, I might even say, to be known. And once again, if we take this further into the spiritual realm, it's not only be known, but to be found worthwhile.
Yeah.
And we'll go back to that my life has meaning, my life has significance, my life has purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I was alive. And I know, and I had that, Kerry Conti, who we had before,
mm-hmm.
talked a bit about that experience of aliveness.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
That's, to me, what making a great name for yourself and making a name for yourself is. It's deep identity and deep sense of meaningfulness and purpose and aliveness.
So this is how they were responding to that in themselves, potentially.
That the story, to me, is a myth about trying to get at how do you find significance? Where do you find that? Because yes,
mm-hmm.
it is good to be known. Because to not be known is as if I didn't even live.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's good to be known. And how do they set about trying to be known?
Well, they're gonna build this city with a large tower and gonna come together and put all their efforts into this thing, this work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty good, right?
Seems like it.
Yeah, it seems like it's a pretty good way. And that's one way to try to find it. Meaning,
to find the significance.
Purpose. So we can look at it as, once again, if you're going to look at this as a story that happened a long time ago, then you're going to be specific to the city and the tower. I'm going to look at it as the city and the tower become not just the city and the tower, but a symbol for this is how I'm finding significance, and therefore a symbol for accomplishment, a symbol for production, a symbol for creativity, maybe even. Okay. So I find my meaning, my purpose, my significance, and that I'm alive in and through accomplishment and through production.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
What's that like when you find your meaning, significance, identity to some degree in what you produce?
Well, I think that's familiar to today. It's not just an old story.
Yeah.
I know that for myself, in moments like that, or moments that I've kind of built my existence or my significance around my production, that it often leads me to just this cycle of wanting to produce more and more, or needing to produce more and more, be recognized more, which doesn't always lead to satisfaction in the long run.
Why? How come?
I think it's, it can lead to a feeling of emptiness, just with the idea of what is enough.
Okay. How much is enough?
How much is enough?
How much do I need to do?
And then what happens if I get to a point where I can't produce?
Yeah.
As I get older or as I retire or whatever, then where is my worth?
Yeah.
How do I start to ask those questions again of who am I? What am I worth? Where's my significance? If I've tied it to something that for whatever reason I'm no longer able to do.
Yeah. People often struggle with that, right?
Yeah. No doubt.
Right. So people can really struggle with that if their identity is found through work,
mm-hmm.
their job, that ends up being a job about production and right. Okay.
Right.
And when that ends.
Yeah.
So when that ends, yes, they come back to that very same question, and that's one of the potential pitfalls of finding significance almost exclusively through production or accomplishment, because in and of themselves, accomplishment and production aren't bad.
They're not bad, right?
Right. They're and in our mind, this story should be, wow, that's great.
Yeah. Look at what they were able to do. They came together. They pooled a resource. I mean, they accomplished this great thing.
Right. But as the story goes on, the God of the story, the deity in the story, is like catches wind of what they're doing. It's like, whoa, man, look what they're doing.
Yeah.
And in the text, the translation of what I'm about to say doesn't translate real well from Hebrew into other languages.
Okay.
But the way most people translate it is God looks and says, wow, they've all got one language, and look at what they're doing. And if they keep doing it, they'll not. There's nothing they won't be able to do. So let's go down and confuse their language. And so God goes down, or whoever goes down, and confuses their language, and so then they don't speak the same language anymore, so they can't communicate.
Right.
So they end up spread out across the world. And part of my response might be, well, why in the world did God do that?
Yeah.
So I'm asking you, why in the world did God do that?
I'm wondering the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, because I mean, it seems on the surface like it's a great thing. And why would it be a bad thing that they would be able to do whatever they set out to do?
Right. So then for me, once again, so we're going to have to take this as a myth, and part of the question is going to be for me within the myth is just what you said. Well, what's wrong with that?
Right.
And I think we started to hit on it a little bit of what's wrong when I find my identity, my significance, my meaning, my name in and through just accomplishment and production, is that it's fleeting.
Yeah.
All right. That's one thing. Another thing could be I start to measure, compare, and judge based on that accomplishment and say, well, I'm good because, and you're not.
Yeah.
Because, and that's where some of the stuff we're talking about with the tragedy in Western North Carolina can come into play. I can do this, you can't do this.
Yeah.
Or you can do this and I can't do this, and then I start to feel bad about myself.
Feel bad. Yeah.
Right. So rather than shifting it to what we were talking about, it's not my value, my worth is how much I can do, or that what I do is so grand and big. It's what is it that I can do, and let's take a look at the gifts and the talents that I have and go from there, and try not to compare.
Yeah.
Right. So perhaps part of what the story's trying to get at by metaphorically saying God spread everybody out is saying, oftentimes what happens when everything becomes about accomplishment and production is competition, and who's better or who's worse, based on what I produce, based on what I've done. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I have a really, really good friend who I've known for over 20 years now, and we work together. He helps me with my dreams, and we do some other things, but that's the main part of our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to a funeral a few weeks ago for a friend of his from high school who he'd kept in touch with, and this friend became extremely accomplished person,
mm-hmm.
massively accomplished person in, I think it was neurosurgery.
Wow.
And he said, and he didn't tell me exactly what it was, but he said, this person has come up with something that's going to have an impact for everybody within the United States. Anybody who has a brain
mm-hmm.
is going to be impacted by some of what this guy has come up with.
Wow.
And he is highly, highly accomplished in his field, and very well respected. And his funeral was packed.
Mm-hmm.
The church was just packed with people. Okay, so on the surface, what a great life.
Yeah.
And yes, it was.
Mm-hmm. One of impact and contribution.
No doubt about it. And as my friend sat there, he sat there and thought, I'm never going to have this.
Yeah. Because
my life has gone and it is lived in a bit more obscurity
mm-hmm.
than this person's life has been. And the gifts that I have had aren't the same gifts that he's had.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend has helped people more with their inner life, like in my case, dreams.
Yeah.
And he said, God, probably at my funeral, there's probably going to be about 6 or 7 people, and, they'll just be hanging out with each other,
mm-hmm.
right? Which was a full life, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. See, for me, I know that my friend has had a huge impact on me.
Right.
I know that he has. Mm-hmm. So I know that his life was significant and meaningful and important. But if I'm going to compare it to the guy,
yeah,
right?
And it was hard for him to see his own worth in the midst of that situation.
He could. Now, thankfully, he does enough of his own work. He could say, no, that guy's temperament was an extroverted, thinking person, and he played that role out completely in that world.
Yeah.
You see, our culture tends to favor that.
Yeah. My
friend is an introverted, feeling person, and he helps people like me in the realm of of the inner life.
Mm-hmm.
But both of those lives were meaningful.
Right.
And both of the people lived their life out fully and completely. And both of those people experienced the significance that living out your full life can bring.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them have a name.
Yeah.
It's just when we just put one up, right? External accomplishment, which is what I'm saying the tower and the mm-hmm. city represent. When we just put that up and everything gets measured against that, then it becomes, a bunch of people rushing around trying to have the best tower. There's another story that I think really, really illustrates for me the Tower of Babel. And it was the very first time I ever did a funeral. So very first time I ever did a funeral, I was in San Antonio. I was 28 years old. And I was driving with a guy from the funeral home, and I was sitting in the back. And just as an aside, it was just kind of freaky to be sitting in the back of like a Lincoln Town car heading to do a funeral. I thought it was like going to Wall Street, And anyway, that's just an aside. and I was driving with him, and we're driving through this part of town called, it was like a gated community called the Dominion. And country music singer George Strait had a house there, and some of the San Antonio Spurs had houses there. So, it was that kind of gated community, big homes and big houses. And we're driving along, and the guy just out of the blue goes, "Wow, look at that. Somebody's building a house right there." and it's just a little bit bigger than his neighbor's. And I was driving along and I thought, dude, funeral home driving dude, telling me this story. And I thought, yeah, that fits right with because like, why does the neighbor's house have to be just a little bit bigger? Now, once again, that doesn't make that guy bad.
Right.
But it's, okay, if I'm going to find my significance in my accomplishments and my house being one of those accomplishments, it's got to be just a little bit bigger and better than the one right next to me, right?
Yeah.
Right? And okay, and as you said before, how long will that last? How long will that be satisfying to you?
Until the next person adds an extra
That's right.
chimney.
Until your neighbors next to you goes, oh yeah?
Yeah.
Well, okay. It's a modern example, I think, of not that it's bad to have a big house, but the limitations of finding your meaning and purpose and identity in how big your house is.
So in the story, do you think that's what the God was trying to save them from rather than punish them?
I think that's one way to read it.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So like I'm saying, this is a story.
Yeah.
So this did not happen at some point in time in the history of the world where God did this. Mm-hmm. I don't think. Mm-hmm. So you get to decide that.
Yeah.
And other people, I don't really want to go in this way because we're not really talking about this, but I'll go in it for a second. Other people have taken that and just said, no, God just said we were too big for our britches and put us in our place. Okay, if that's the way you want to see that, okay. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to come back to no, because the central motivation for doing what they were doing was trying to find existence.
It wasn't a bad pursuit.
Yeah, it wasn't a bad pursuit. They weren't too big for their britches in my mind. They were trying to have the experience of what it is to be alive, what it is to have a name. So I'm going to come back to that over and over and over again. And the reason is because I have experienced in myself and I have experienced with other people that's what they're searching for. And I think when there's a tragedy or something like this, it's a microcosm of finding that out.
Just brings it to the surface.
It does. It brings it to the surface. And everybody wants to make a difference.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
It's a good thing. Right.
The question then becomes how.
How.
And it's that same question that can be applied to all of life all of the time.
Yeah.
How does my life matter? And what I'm saying to you is something like this is saying, well, you could say your life matters because of how much you produced. Mm-hmm. And see what that does.
That's a way.
That's right. That is a way. And I'm not even going to say that's bad. I think it can be helpful and good. Mm-hmm. But there is the potential within living a life like that, just by what you said, just by the fact that there'll come a time when you can't produce as much as you used to.
Right. Then
what are you going to do? And what I see with people who are oftentimes in that place is they really struggle with meaning and worth and who am I, because everything was wrapped up in their job. Mm-hmm. Okay? Doesn't make them bad.
Yeah.
It just means maybe you're more than your job.
Well, I think it's a danger of just any one thing. It's not necessarily have to be a job. I mean, you think about an athlete or an Olympian, or you think about an artist. Or I remember I was on a trip one time with some people, and we were sitting around the campfire one night, and we were going around the campfire kind of talking about what we like to do, what our hobbies were. And the guy who was older said, I've realized that I need to have, he's like, I feel like I need to have 4 to 5 hobbies. He's like, because it's too easy for one hobby to be taken away. And he was like, I was a runner and I got injured. And he's like, and I went into depression with the idea that I couldn't run anymore. And he's like, and I didn't have anything else. And he's like, now I swim and I paint and I volunteer at this place, and for me, that was a real wake-up call with the idea of just any narrowed focus can be a great thing. It can lead to mastery, in that, but at the same time, it can be taken away. You know, and so just thinking about that, where your significance is, and how you deal with that idea if you're so driven toward one thing.
Yeah, and so here's a guy once again then who's a highly competent person. He has the capacity to do all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some people in the world who do not.
Right.
Right? But they're of no less significance than he within this mindset. Because the same person who wrote this story, the scholars say biblical scholars say, who wrote the Tower of Babel story, wrote the beginning of the Abraham narrative.
Oh, okay.
And Abraham is offered the same thing that these people want. And what they want is a name.
A name. Interesting.
And so Abraham is offered a great name, but the way he is offered it is not through what he does, but through trust. Through trust in his relationship with the deity.
Right.
And then so now, I hate to open this can of worms in a sense, because we can almost do another podcast about what that means.
Just that, yeah.
All right. But for now, what we can say is, for me, what I'm going to say is, for me, having a deep relationship with the deity, from where I live my life and where I find my meaning, to me is what it means to find the depth of who you are as a person. Mm-hmm. Those two things are the same thing to me.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why, once again, coming back to the tragedy, it can crystallize and give you the chance to see where your gifts actually lie. And you might be one of the people who's more, I'll help that one person, and in helping that one person, I help the whole world, and that's enough. Or you might be that person who has millions and millions of dollars and can help however many. But they're the same from a spiritual perspective.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, and everything in between.
Right.
Right? So the person who called me up on the phone and wants to have that, my hope for that person, and then everybody else who wants to help in situations like this, is find out what you can do and do that, and that's all you need to do. And trust that that's all you need to do. And trust where your heart is tugged and pulled.
Yeah.
And that it won't pull you in the direction of, I'm going to end up trying to do something that I don't have the capacity to. Right?
Yeah. I was thinking as we were kind of preparing for this, someone had talked about just that feeling of trust and that being able to kind of sense when that moment appears, and the work that they had done over time to heighten their senses, to be able to, in those moments, know, I'm going to recognize this when it comes.
Yeah.
And to have the patience, but also the confidence and the trust to say, my moment's going to come, and when it comes, I'm going to respond. I'm going to know this is my moment.
Yeah.
And that takes time and effort.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
But that's a real, when you're talking about that trust, I think that could be a very comforting feeling in the midst of I don't know what to do, how can I help, all of that, to find your way on a journey to the point of being able to do what you said, where you can trust your ability and what you can do, and that not only is that enough, it's great.
Yes, it is. And then you'll experience a kind of that deeper inner sense of knowing, and I think aliveness. The aliveness that I'm talking about from the story, right? And that Buechner talks about, your great, what was it?
Great gladness.
Great gladness meets that hunger. You'll experience that, right? Trusting that inner knowing.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the More Than One Way podcast, brought to you by the Center for Spiritual Practice in Knoxville, Tennessee. We really appreciate your time and would love to hear your feedback. You can reach us by emailing hello@morethanonewaypod.com, or you can connect with us on social media using the handle at More Than One Way Pod. If you found this episode helpful, we hope that you'll share it with your friends, with your family, with people you work with all the people who you know. Thank you and take care.